In this lesson, I'm going to talk about the anatomy and movements of the soft palate. We usually don't think that much about the soft palate when we talk about articulation, because the soft palate doesn't move with the kind of specificity with which we can engage the jaw, the lips, and the tongue, and it also isn't directly responsible for the articulation of that many phonemes. However, the soft palate is very important for resonance. I think that articulation and resonance are completely inseparable. If you think about it, what we do to create resonance is everything that we do to shape the vocal tract, and that's how we produce the sounds, the phonemes that we use in singing. So anything that impacts resonance is going to overlap with what we need to talk about when we're considering articulation. The soft palate makes up the rear portion of the roof of your mouth. It's located right in back of the hard palate, and it's made out of muscle and connective tissue. The primary role in human anatomy that the soft palate plays has to do with swallowing. It elevates when we swallow, and it's very effective for keeping food from getting into your nose, making sure that the food goes down where it needs to be. But when we're talking about its role in the singer's instrument, the main role of the soft palate is that it regulates nasality. When the soft palate is in a lowered position, the nasal port is open and your breath can flow in and out through your nose. When the soft palate is in a raised position, the nasal port is sealed off and you must breathe through your mouth. Most classical singing teachers recommend a raised position for the soft palate because it helps to promote full and balanced resonance. So whenever you're sustaining on a vowel sound, they're going to ask you to allow your soft palate to remain in a lifted, raised position so that it closes off the nasal port and minimizes nasality when you sing. However, I do know other classical teachers who advocate for a lowered soft palate while you're singing, and for some other styles of music where you might want a little bit of extra twang, it can be very helpful to sing with the soft palate in a lowered position. My point here is not to tell you what to do with the soft palate, it's just to discuss how it works so that you can do with it whatever you want. There are two important muscles that contribute to soft palate elevation: the levator veli palatini and the tensor veli palatini. These muscles attach the soft palate to positions inside the skull. They don't directly interact with any other muscles, not those muscles located in the cheeks or your forehead. The palatoglossus attaches to the tongue. It pulls the palate closer to the tongue rather than lifts the tongue. The palatopharyngeus attaches to the thyroid cartilage of the larynx and causes not the soft palate, but rather the larynx to slightly ascend in support of swallowing. We have very little direct control over the soft palate. We also get very little sensory feedback from it. As a result, a lot of myths and misconceptions have arisen about how the soft palate operates. So in addition to talking about how it works, I also need to take a moment to clear up some things about what it doesn't do and how it doesn't work. Raising the soft palate does not cause the tongue to depress. Your soft palate is connected to the tongue via the palatoglossus, and when this muscle is engaged, the soft palate and the tongue will raise and lower in tandem. When we yawn, it feels like the soft palate goes up and the tongue retracts, and so some people think that, if you raise the soft palate, it's going to cause the tongue to depress, but in fact, that's not what's happening. Tensing your forehead to raise your eyebrows does not actually elevate the soft palate, and neither does elevating your lips in a sneer. None of the facial muscles have any connection to the soft palate. The muscles that raise the soft palate are attached to your skull. You may nevertheless subjectively experience a connection between these movements. Many of us do, which is why they were thought to be connected. If I raise my forehead, I do feel something in the vicinity of my soft palate, and if I curl my lip, I feel a little bit there too. However, it's useful to decouple these movements because they're not directly connected. Your lip and your forehead are very useful for facial expressions. And so when you consider that you want your soft palate to be raised most of the time when you're sustaining, if you need to have your forehead and your lip engaged most of the time when you're singing, that's going to have an impact on your facial expression. It's going to limit what you can express with your face while you're singing. So it's a good idea to just figure out how to decouple these movements. The soft palate does not lift and expand like a parachute in response to breath release. The sensation of airflow moving across the soft palate when it's in a raised position may make it feel as though there is a causal connection, but this is not the case. Because so many of the components of our vocal anatomy are hard to sense or move directly, it's important to be aware of whether or not these causal relationships actually exist. You can lift your soft palate without exhaling, in the same sense that you can create an N without engaging your jaw. We tend to couple tongue and jaw movement together to create an N in speech, but then as we've worked on in this course, it's useful to decouple those movements so that you can articulate and without engaging your jaw. Similarly, it's really important to feel like you can raise your soft palate without feeling like there's a lot of breath moving against it. Optimizing the soft palate for singing articulation has more to do with just getting greater kinesthetic awareness of where it is and how it moves, not actually strengthening or tensing things deliberately that are around it. Because we get so little sensory feedback from the soft palate, if you start tensing things in that area, you probably aren't going to be actually tensing your soft palate. You might be just like tightening things up around it that should be relaxed and open, that will lead to better resonance. So first, try to get a better visual idea of where your soft palate is and what it does. When your soft palate is relaxed and lowered, you'll see the uvula dangling down in the back of your mouth. The soft palate itself is the structure that you can see just above and behind the uvula. Here are some ways you can begin to sense the soft palate. One thing that I like to do is imagine putting my head underwater. If you put your head underwater, then your soft palate will reflexively ascend and close off your nasal port to keep water from rushing in through your nose. So maybe just imagining that can help, or you can actually just go to the swimming pool and put your head underwater and you'll see what I'm talking about. Soft palate's going to close off your nose right away. Another way to get a good sense of where the soft palate is and what it does is to make yourself swallow in slow motion. Try that. I can feel how it comes up and it closes off my nasal port to prevent food or anything else from getting into my nasal cavity. And finally, a really great exercise to sense the movement of the soft palate is an aspirated K. First, try exhaling and going k-k-k-k-k-k with just not engaging your voice, just sort of articulating a K and letting some air move through. Then, see if you can do the same movement while inhaling. It's going to feel a little bit awkward, but if you inhale and do that sort of aspirated K in reverse, you're going to feel how your soft palate closes. Our interest in the soft palate when we're talking about singing mostly has to do with its ability to regulate nasality. Again, when it's in a raised position, it's going to minimize nasality. And if you want a little bit of extra twang, you can lower it, and that's going to give you a little bit more of a nasal sound. It's important to pay attention to this because when you articulate or sustain on humming sounds, the soft palate has to be in a dropped position because there's no place else for the air to go. Since your mouth is going to be closed when you go and your tongue is sealing off the roof of your mouth when you go or What that means is you need to be able to allow the soft palate to come back up and seal off the nasal port again once you're done with that consonant. Otherwise, it's going to remain in a dropped position and you're going to have a little bit more nasality that you might not want.
Alten Märchen winkt es hervor mit weißer Hand, da singt es und da fliegt das von einem Zauberland.